Welcome to Textile Update, the podcast where we can share our passion for textiles, fibers, and yarns. This is Gwendolyn Hustvedt. Our set of episodes on finishes continues with aesthetic finishes. Well, aesthetic finishes are any finish that alters the appearance of the fabric. This is very much a catch-all category. A few of the things I'm going to talk about here don't really make the fabric substantially look better. They just, you can just see them. And that's important because the functional finishes in most cases are undetectable to the naked eye. We can only detect them through performance, right? Does it catch on fire? Does it protect you from sunburn? And so we're just going to keep those finishes in their own category. And then basically any finish that isn't routine ends up in this category here. So I have grouped them, according to luster or hand or texture and design. But some of the quote textures or designs are going to be things like, oh, look, there's a aluminum coating on it. We can see it. Oh, look. That's the main caveat here when I say aesthetic, because we tend to think of aesthetic as meaning something looks good. Then it doesn't necessarily, it just means we can see it. So let's start with luster, because this is a big category where we experimented a lot, especially in the early Industrial Revolution. At least one of them you already know about, which is beetling. We beat the linen fabric to break up the fiber bundles, remove the pectin that's around the fibers, make the fibers smaller because they're now not glued to their neighbor with the pectin. We do this to improve the absorbency and the softness of the fabric, but it does also change the aesthetics. It looks shinier now because, the pectin was kind of crusty stuff, and now it's gone and the beauty of the fiber can shine through. Now the next category I hinted at when we finished up with the routine finishes. I mentioned that the calendar that we used to iron it, to flatten it, could be used for other things. And so I want to get into those now when I talk about a category of finishes called friction calendaring. Again, not like calendar, but like colander, only spelt slightly differently. So not a thing you put on the wall, but a dude's name. So to friction calendar, we'll dip the fabric in some sort of coating, like resin or starch, and then we pass it through very high-speed rollers. And these rollers basically polish the surface of the fabric. So kind of think of wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, right? We have a luster or a glaze, and now the fabric can also repel water. And these finishes were important in the whole history of the Industrial Revolution prior to the invention of hydrophobic fibers. This was the only way we could really get waterproofness, right, was to polish this resin on. And having it be polished meant people could look at the fabric and know it was waterproof because it was shiny. I've applied wax to a textile. I bought something from Fjällräven and bought a Greenland wax cube and ironed it onto my painter's apron. And now if I wanted to have that be kind of shiny and glazed, I could try to buff it with a high-speed buffer. But obviously it would have been easier if I just purchased fabric that was already embedded with wax and then glazed. So some companies like Fjällräven is kind of going old school, and so you might see these sorts of finishes come back. Some of the names for these fabrics are things like glazed cotton or polished cotton. You may also hear it referred to as oilcloth, especially if you're reading historical fiction. The captain's secret orders are wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from getting wet, right, when he climbs into his ship to begin spying on Napoleon or something. Cire, C-I-R-E, with a little accent on it, that is means like a wet look, right? So you might buy something with that. Of course, nowadays the resin may be a synthetic, right, like a polyurethane, but still it will be polished in order to give it a good shine. I mentioned chintz also in a previous episode when I was talking about block printing. So the word chintz refers to fabric that comes from China. Now, when we say, "Ooh, it's chintzy," we mean like that it's old-fashioned and too darling, right? Like, let's see, think of what was her name, Ms. Umbridge in Harry Potter, right? And the kittens on the wall, right? And so there was a certain interior design style where chintz was used all over the place, but it was in fact printed textiles that were imported into the UK, and so many came not actually from China but from Indonesia. They came via ships that went to China. Look into the whole opium wars, for example, to understand the triangular trade there that resulted in the founding of Hong Kong. There's opium involved, there's silver involved, gunpowder, and of course textiles. Very often rode in the hold of ships to and from the different places in this complex global trade route. So chintz is polished and is great for upholstery, right? Because it can be used indoor or outdoor. You can have people sit on it who are a little bit damp, and it won't be damaged. Now, another cool thing they discovered when they were using these calendars was that if you took a unbalanced plain weave fabric, so rib weave fabric like taffeta, and ran it through a calendar, not necessarily running that fast, not necessarily, or depending on the fiber, not even hot. If it's thermoplastic, the roller can't be hot, right? But we would run it through the calendar, and then we would see that there was change in the appearance of the fabric. The ribs are now flattened, and they're flattened kind of in a random way, but they lean on each other, and so you end up with sort of these circles of ribs that are all leaning one way, and then suddenly they break and lean the other. And we end up with what looks like tree grain, or what's called watermark designs. So moire, M-O-I-R-E with an accent, moire, is a fabric that results from calendaring rib weaves. You can tell if the moire is real, so that the design isn't just printed onto the surface of the fabric. If you look closely, you will see that the filling yarns are larger, right, and the distinctive ribs. If you don't see that, then it's not a real moire. And you might have a swatch kit that has an example of both a real moire and a faux moire. So that's the changes in luster. Let's talk about changes in hand. We're going to go from soft to stiff. So softening is very popular. People now especially prize textiles that give them comfort, so that don't challenge their body in any way. We aren't showing the certainty of our character by wearing stiff clothes like we might have in a previous century. Nowadays, we're not even sure really how to define what character is, and so certainly couldn't have an outfit that showed character. Sorry, that was an aside. Kind of a bitter one, but when you read a lot of history, you sort of wonder how you would have stacked up in a previous era in a corset. So softeners, one of the big ways to make something soft is just to add a chemical, a softening agent. It's especially used on cellulose fibers, which end up having a tendency to be kind of stiff and have a scratchy hand after they're laundered. Well, of course, the challenge with this is that these softeners reduce absorbency. So if you're using them on a towel, the towel will feel soft when you rub it against your bare skin, but the towel is actually less effective at drying you. Also, the softeners reduce the strength and abrasion resistance of the fabrics that they're applied to, while increasing the hairiness and pilling. So you end up with a lot more dust because the fibers can slip out into your dryer, into the air in the bathroom. That's why you might have to dust the bathroom a bit more than other parts of the house, and the textiles won't last quite as long. But your hands will slip over the silicone that's applied, and you will sense a feeling of softness. This is very much a temporary finish. It washes off every time you launder it, which is why people purchase the finish and apply it during laundering. Another way to make things soft is permanent, right? And that is what we would call a wash. So this not only softens the hand, but it also lightens the color, and typically uses an abrasive, something that oxidizes or breaks down the fibers in some way, damages them, and then the broken fibers now feel softer on the hand, and the color is lighter because the dyes on the fiber may have been broken as well. So we now have a lot of lint and dye in the wash water. So we could talk about pre-wash, stone wash, acid wash, enzyme wash, sand wash, washing, frosting, right? Bio wash that uses an enzyme. And all of those will soften especially denim, and lighten the color. I was at a factory in the Dominican Republic, and we went into the finishing room, and there were huge dryers full of pumice stones. You got to be careful you're not standing in front of those while they're running, because if they open inadvertently, the stones will fly out and give a new meaning to stoned at work. So these pumice stones are basically abrading fibers off the surface of the denim in order to make the denim very soft, and then it's made into jeans. They didn't end there. They used sandpaper to scrub in this case, what was in style at the time was to scrub the back sides of the jeans in order to remove some of the finish. The disturbing part about that visit was seeing the huge wastewater pond outside. All of the water from that's rinsed off of the frosted denim, that had been distressed by hand, and all of the water from the machines that were doing the stone washing. It's full of denim fibers, and they ran it through a centrifuge, so it was just a huge stack of broken fiber, taller than me, outside the building, but also a lagoon full of deep, dark, almost black water that is the indigo dye that has been scraped off of the denim. And they'll try to bring the dye out of solution in the water, right, to clean the water. But they admitted that they'll never get the water clean enough to drink. It may be used for agricultural purposes, but not for drinking. And it's sort of sad to think that our style is polluting somebody else's water. Just somehow looking at the backside of those jeans, they just don't look as hot now, do they? If we realize that somebody just rubbed their butt in somebody else's river, right? I mean, that's kind of what you're doing, is just leaving your foul butt pollution in someone else's river. Yeah, it kind of really irritates me. It rubs me the wrong way, so to speak. I really wish distressing as a trend would go away. I think it's distressing. It produces lower quality products that aren't as sturdy and don't last as long, and that people can't value as much, even though they pay quite a bit more for it. And they never really think or understand about the damage that's being done, not only to the textile, but to potentially the water supply system in a country that doesn't have strong enough laws or protections to protect themselves against a company that wants to do that. So, yeah, I get a little passionate about that when I was told no beer. I couldn't drink the water, even though I offered to. Yeah, I think that just it's kind of crappy to complete the butt metaphor there. So another way that we could do this is using a roller. Big surprise. It's a very popular tool. The roller covered with sandpaper. So we would call this sanding or sueding or emerizing. And think about that. Emery boards, we use them to rub our fingernails, right? They can get pretty hot. And the emery board abrades the keratin off of the tips of our fingernails. So we're breaking the fibers using these emery covered rollers. So it'll weaken or tear or disintegrate the fabric, but gosh, it will feel soft. We have to be careful. We can't do this with thermoplastic fibers, things that are made with synthetic fibers, because the rollers get hot. You can feel the heat when you're rubbing your nail with an emery board. That heat can glaze the surface of the thermoplastic. This is how we define a challis. A challis is a fabric that's been sanded or sueded to make it softer. This emerizing is done with the microfiber fabrics to really highlight the fact that the fibers are small, so they can be broken and damaged during the emerizing, and we can feel all the soft broken ends. Another thing we do with a roller, in this case, it won't be covered with sandpaper. It'll be covered with wire bristles. And we'll use a low twist staple yarn to weave a fabric, right? Like a low twist cotton fabric. And then we'll rub it with these rollers that are covered with wire bristles. And they pull up, they tease up fibers out of the low twist yarn. And they'll all follow the same direction as the rollers, and that's produces what we call a nap. We can actually see it, right? If we turn the fabric one way, the fibers are kind of laying down in one direction and create a bit of a luster. When we turn and look at it the other way, we're looking at the ends of the fiber pointing towards us as they're laying at an angle, and it's kind of much deeper and darker look. So this makes the fabric we call flannel, right? And we will do this on sheets, and we can do it with wool or with cotton, and it improves thermal retention. It also improves pilling, which can't really be called an improvement, but it makes the fabric really soft. So napping, N-A-P-P-I-N-G, because it creates a nap, which is this soft fibrous surface. Now, in some cases, we just want to get all the fibers to go in the right direction, but our goal isn't really to raise a bunch of fibers up out of the surface. So we can do something called brushing, and brushing uses the same roller that we might use in emerizing, so a sandpaper roller, but the goal is not to actually damage the fibers. The goal is just to kind of remove any marks on the fabric that might have been there from finishing and handling, right? So to kind of get all the fibers pointed in the same direction. So in our pad range, we might just have a roller that just brushes the surface of the fabric using the sandpaper, right? So it's just kind of a quick swipe across the surface. So I just wanted to mention that. Something you could say, oh, this is a brushed denim. It just means that it's been kind of tidied up. So that's all of the softening, right? Chemicals and mechanical means. Let's turn to the other way we might change the hand, which is through using some sort of making it crisp in some way or stiff, so the opposite of soft. Now, the first way that we might make it kind of crisp or stiff is to starch it. And originally starch was some sort of, literally a starch from, potatoes, right? So when we say, oh, I don't eat much starches, right? Or potentially some sort of light glue, like, made from keratin or something. Starch is temporary and washes out, and unfortunately it yellows with age. So if you have an old textile, an old jabot neck cloth that was starched, it will start to yellow over time. That's why one of the first things that museum conservators do with old textiles is rinse them incredibly carefully in distilled water in order to try and remove any finishes that can be removed that might age over time. So back in the day, everybody loved the stiff and starched collars and things. Again, it showed how correct they were, how stiff they were. So if we had a century-long stiff fetish, now we're probably into a century-long soft and floppy fetish. Another way we could stiffen up fabric is to parchmentize it. This is permanent. Parchmentizing only works with cotton. So we'll take a combed cotton, something that's been where the fibers are highly twisted and close together, and then we'll dip it very quickly in sulfuric acid, which just damages the outer surface of the fibers, making them very stiff. It improves transparency because, gosh, you just burned off a little bit of the fiber. All right, so that covers hand and luster. In the next episode, we'll talk about coatings, which may or may not be pretty to look at, and designs, which, somebody thought was pretty or they wouldn't have designed it.